I never imagined that a simple knock on my apartment door would change everything. It was a lazy Sunday afternoon in late June, the kind where the summer heat makes everything move in slow motion. I'd been lounging around in shorts and an old t-shirt, half watching some forgettable show on Netflix, when I heard those 3 soft knocks. Not expecting anyone, I almost ignored it, thinking it might be a neighbor looking for a cup of sugar or something equally mundane. If only I had known what, or rather who, was waiting on the other side. When I opened the door, my breath caught in my throat. There stood Ethan, his dark hair still damp, water droplets clinging to his shoulders, and nothing but a white towel wrapped loosely around his waist. His feet were bare against the hallway carpet, and he had this mischievous smile that made my heart race. We'd been dancing around each other for weeks, this strange tension building between us that neither of us had been brave enough to acknowledge. "Hey," he said, so casually you'd think showing up at someone's door practically naked was the most normal thing in the world. "My shower broke. Mind if I use yours?" Before I could even process what was happening, he stepped past me into my apartment, that familiar scent of his cologne filling my senses. I closed the door, trying to gather my thoughts, when he turned to me with a look I'll never forget. "So," he said, his fingers lightly gripping the edge of the towel, "are you going to hold this for me, or should I just let it drop?" I stood there, frozen, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. Was this really happening? What exactly was he asking? And why did part of me desperately want to see that towel hit the floor? Let me explain why this moment mattered so much. It wasn't just about the obvious physical tension between us. It was about crossing a line that I wasn't sure I was ready to cross, about acknowledging feelings I'd been trying to ignore for months. Ethan and I had met about 6 months earlier at a mutual friend's housewarming party. I remember noticing him immediately. He had this way of commanding attention without even trying. He was telling a story to a small group, gesturing animatedly with his hands, everyone around him laughing. I found myself gravitating toward him, pretending to refill my drink just to be within earshot of his conversation. When our eyes met across the kitchen counter, he paused mid-sentence, gave me a smile that felt like it was just for me, and then seamlessly integrated me into the conversation. "You must be Alex," he said. "Jamie's told me about you." The way he said my name made it sound special somehow, like he'd been waiting to say it out loud. Over the next few months, we kept running into each other, sometimes by chance, sometimes through our increasingly transparent mutual friends who seemed determined to push us together. We'd grab coffee, bump into each other at the gym, or end up sitting next to each other at group dinners. Each time, that undeniable chemistry grew stronger. Our conversations flowed effortlessly, jumping from silly debates about the best pizza toppings to deep discussions about our dreams and fears. There was the night we walked home together after a friend's birthday celebration, taking the long way through the park, neither of us wanting the evening to end. Our shoulders kept brushing against each other, and at one point, when he reached out to stop me from stepping in a puddle, his hand lingered on my arm just a moment too long. We both felt it, that electric current that passed between us, but neither of us acknowledged it. Or the afternoon we met for what was supposed to be a quick lunch that turned into hours of conversation, the restaurant emptying around us as we lost track of time. When the waiter finally hinted that they needed our table, Ethan leaned forward and said, "I could talk to you forever. You know that?" The sincerity in his eyes made my stomach flip. But despite all these moments, I held back. You see, I'd only recently come to terms with my sexuality, and the thought of acting on these feelings terrified me. What if I misread the signals? What if it changed our friendship? What if I wasn't ready for what might come next? It was easier to pretend that the lingering glances and accidental touches were just friendly gestures, nothing more. And now here he was, standing in my living room with nothing but a towel between us and the truth we'd been avoiding. I stammered, my mouth suddenly dry. "Your shower broke." It was a ridiculous question, clearly an attempt to redirect the conversation to safer territory. Ethan laughed, a warm sound that somehow eased the tension and heightened it simultaneously. "Well, that part's true, but I could have gone to any of our friends. I wanted to come here, to see you." The honesty in his voice made something shift inside me. Here's what this means in practice. Sometimes the scariest moments in our lives are actually doorways to exactly where we need to be. I'd been hiding from my feelings, from the possibility of this connection, but in that moment, I realized how exhausting all that avoidance had been. Why now? I asked, genuinely curious about what had prompted this bold move. Ethan took a step closer, close enough that I could see the different shades of brown in his eyes. Because I'm tired of pretending, aren't you? Every time we're together, there's this thing between us. And I see the way you look at me when you think I don't notice. I felt heat rise to my cheeks. Had I been that obvious? And how do I look at you? I challenged, finding a bit of courage from somewhere deep inside. Like you're trying to solve a puzzle, he said softly. Like you want something but you're afraid to reach for it. He paused, vulnerability flashing across his face. Am I wrong? The question hung in the air between us. This was the moment, the fork in the road where I had to choose which path to take. I could laugh it off, pretend he was imagining things, and maintain the safe distance we'd established. Or I could be honest, not just with him but with myself. You might be wondering why this choice was so difficult. After all, here was this attractive man clearly interested in me. Shouldn't that be simple? But for someone still navigating the complex terrain of their own identity, nothing is simple. Each step toward authenticity feels like stepping off a cliff, not knowing if you'll fall or fly. I took a deep breath. You're not wrong, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. But this scares me. You scare me. His expression softened. Why? Because this is real, I said. It's not just some abstract possibility anymore. You're standing here, and whatever happens next changes everything. And what if it doesn't work? What if we ruin our friendship? What if it's amazing? He interrupted, his voice gentle but firm. What if all these months of wondering and waiting lead to something incredible? Don't we owe it to ourselves to find out? As he spoke, I realized something important. Fear and excitement often feel remarkably similar in our bodies. The racing heart, the butterflies in the stomach, the heightened awareness. The difference lies in how we interpret those sensations. For months, I'd been labeling my reaction to Ethan as anxiety, as something to be cautious about. But what if I reframed it as anticipation, as eagerness for what might be? Let me explain why this realization matters. So often in life, we let fear make our decisions for us. We choose safety over possibility, the known over the unknown. But growth never happens in comfort zones. The most meaningful experiences in our lives usually come from taking risks, from being vulnerable enough to say, this matters to me, and I'm willing to leap even without knowing where I'll land. Standing there, looking at Ethan, I made a decision. I stepped forward, closing the distance between us, and reached for the edge of the towel. His breath hitched slightly, his eyes never leaving mine. The air between us felt charged with possibility. I'll hold it, I said, my fingers brushing against his as I took the edge of the towel. For now. A slow smile spread across his face, understanding the implication of my words. This wasn't a rejection, it was a promise. A not yet rather than a no. I was acknowledging what existed between us while also asking for time. I can work with that, he said, and the relief in his voice was palpable. For what it's worth, I'm scared too. You think this is easy for me? Showing up at your door like this? I changed my outfit 3 times before deciding on this towel ensemble. We both burst into laughter, the tension transforming into something lighter, more playful. That's another thing worth noting. How quickly fear can dissolve when met with honesty and humor. In that moment of shared laughter, I felt the walls I'd built around my heart begin to crumble. Your shower's through there, right? He asked, gesturing toward the hallway. I nodded. Towels are in the cabinet. Use whatever products you want. I'll, make some coffee while you're in there. Sounds perfect, he said. And then, in a move that caught me completely off guard, he leaned forward and pressed a soft, quick kiss to my cheek. Thank you, he whispered, and I wasn't sure if he was thanking me for the shower or for something much more significant. As he disappeared into the bathroom, I leaned against the wall, my fingers touching the spot where his lips had been. Something had fundamentally shifted between us, and there was no going back. But for the first time, I didn't want to go back. I wanted to move forward, to see where this path might lead. The sound of the shower running gave me time to collect my thoughts. I moved to the kitchen on autopilot, preparing coffee while my mind replayed every interaction Ethan and I had ever had, now seeing them through this new lens of acknowledged attraction. Had everyone else seen it? Had we been the last to know, or at least the last to admit it? I thought about our friend Jamie, who had introduced us. The knowing smile she'd give when Ethan and I would get lost in conversation at group gatherings. The way she'd conveniently cancel plans last minute, leaving just the two of us. Had she been orchestrating this all along? And what about my own journey to this moment? I'd spent so much of my life trying to fit into the boxes others had created for me. The good son, the responsible student, the conventional man with conventional dreams. Coming to terms with my sexuality had been a gradual process of unlearning those expectations, of giving myself permission to want what I truly wanted, not what I thought I should want. Ethan represented more than just a potential relationship. He represented a life lived authentically, without apology. The way he moved through the world with such confidence, such self-assurance, had always fascinated me. Maybe that's what had drawn me to him from the beginning. Not just his warm smile or his infectious laugh, but the freedom he embodied. The shower stopped, and I felt my heart rate pick up again. What would happen now? Would we talk about what had just transpired, or would we slip back into our comfortable pattern of almost but not quite? I wasn't sure which possibility made me more nervous. When Ethan emerged from the bathroom, he was wearing his jeans but no shirt, his hair damp and tousled. He accepted the coffee I offered with a smile, our fingers brushing in the exchange. We moved to the couch, sitting close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from his skin, but not touching. "So," he said after taking a sip, "that wasn't exactly how I planned to tell you how I feel." I raised an eyebrow. "You had a plan?" "Several, actually. None of them involved a towel emergency." He laughed. "Though I have to say, the look on your face when you opened that door was pretty priceless." "I bet it was," I said, feeling more at ease now. "For the record, subtle you are not." Subtlety wasn't working. "Do you know how many hints I've dropped over the past few months?" I was starting to think you weren't interested, or that I was completely misreading the situation. I shook my head. I was interested. Very interested. I just didn't know what to do with those feelings. This is all new territory for me. Ethan's expression grew serious. "I know, and I don't want to push you into anything you're not ready for. We can take this as slow as you need." His consideration touched me deeply. It would have been easy for him to press his advantage, to rush forward now that the door had been opened. Instead, he was giving me space to move at my own pace, to find my footing on this new path. "I appreciate that," I said, "but I don't want to be so cautious that I miss out on something important. On someone important." I gathered my courage and reached for his hand, intertwining our fingers. "Maybe we could figure it out together? No pressure, just seeing where this goes." The smile that lit up his face was worth every moment of fear and uncertainty I'd experienced. "I'd like that," he said, squeezing my hand. "Very much." That afternoon stretched into evening as we talked for hours, recounting our perspectives on all those near misses and almost moments we'd shared. We ordered takeout and watched a movie, gradually shifting closer until his arm was around me and my head rested on his shoulder. It felt simultaneously new and familiar, like finding a piece of myself I hadn't realized was missing. When he finally left that night, fully clothed this time, he kissed me properly at the door. It was gentle and questioning at first, then deeper as I responded, my hands finding their way to his waist, pulling him closer. When we broke apart, both slightly breathless, he rested his forehead against mine. "For the record," he murmured, "I'm really glad my shower broke." I laughed. Was that even true, or was it just an excuse? His eyes danced with mischief. "I'll never tell. But maybe check your building's maintenance schedule before you make any assumptions." After he left, I stood in my apartment, which somehow felt different now, brighter, fuller, charged with possibility. That's the thing about moments of truth. They transform not just our relationships with others, but our relationship with ourselves and the spaces we occupy. In the weeks that followed, Ethan and I navigated this new dimension of our relationship with a mixture of excitement and careful consideration. We had dinner dates and long walks, movie nights that turned into deep conversations about our hopes and fears. We introduced each other to our favorite books and music, discovering the joy of sharing the things we loved with someone who was quickly becoming essential. There were challenges, of course. My family's reaction when I eventually introduced Ethan as more than a friend. The occasional discomfort I still felt with public displays of affection. The learning curve of physical intimacy with someone who mattered so deeply to me. But through it all, there was a sense of rightness, of finally allowing myself to experience life in full color rather than the muted tones I'd accepted before. Looking back now, I'm struck by how a single moment can serve as a catalyst for transformation. If Ethan hadn't shown up at my door that day, would we have continued our dance of almost but not quite indefinitely? Would I have found the courage to cross that line on my own? It's impossible to know, but I'm grateful I didn't have to find out. What I do know is this. Sometimes the most significant growth happens when we're pushed to the edge of our comfort zones, when we're presented with a choice that feels both terrifying and irresistible. In that moment with the towel, I wasn't just deciding whether to acknowledge my attraction to Ethan. I was deciding what kind of life I wanted to live. One dictated by fear and expectations, or one guided by authenticity and the courage to pursue what brings me joy. I chose the latter, and everything changed. Not just my relationship status or my weekend plans, but the way I move through the world, the way I understand myself and what I deserve. It's a continuous journey, this process of becoming more fully myself. But now I have someone walking beside me who encourages every step. So if you find yourself standing at a similar crossroads, facing your own version of that towel moment, remember this. The path of authenticity isn't always easy, but it's infinitely more fulfilling than the alternative. The vulnerability required to say, "This is who I am, this is what I want," is terrifying, but it's also the gateway to the deepest connections and most profound joy we can experience. As for Ethan and me, we're still writing our story day by day. His shower works perfectly fine now, if it was ever broken at all, but he spends most nights at my place anyway. Sometimes, when he catches me looking at him across a room full of friends or in the quiet moments before sleep, he'll smile and ask, "What are you thinking about?" And I'll tell him the truth. "I'm thinking about how grateful I am that you showed up at my door that day, barefoot with a towel, and asked me to make a choice I didn't know I was ready for." Because sometimes the bravest thing we can do is to let the towel drop, metaphorically speaking, and stand in the truth of who we are and what we want. Everything else, all the beauty and connection that follows, begins with that single act of courage. Total _char_count, 18,216.